go. Look at that magic. Well, good morning, everybody. You know, it is so fun to see people's faces. You think about doing a presentation and preparing, and then when you get to see the people that are actually going to be joining in on the call, it is so fun. It's so exciting. It really makes me feel good to know there's people out there that are listening and I can place a face with the name. So today we're going to be talking about overcoming fear, but when we say overcome it, fears are always going to be there. They're just a part of life. It's part about being a human being as we have fear, and it's natural. So what is fear? Fear is an emotional state, and it's also a survival mechanism. So fear has a purpose, and that's to keep us safe. But it can also be unpleasant and like this strong emotion caused by anticipation or an awareness of danger. So back when we needed it to protect us from, say, like a saber-toothed tiger chasing us, it was that form of protection, and it would signal for our fight or our flight's response to kick in. But I don't know about you. I have never been chased by a tiger. So it's not something that we have to worry about in that sense, but physiologically, fear, even nowadays, can still make us feel that same way. And our heart may race, or we may get like a clammy hands, or we start to breathe shallowly. So fear still is very present even now, and it's driven by our thoughts and our emotions. So fear is this unknown, right? And it can feel uncomfortable and it can feel quite scary. But be aware of your fears. And even if the worst case scenario were to happen, would you still be alive? Most situations we fear in the modern age are not life or death, but physiologically, they still make us feel that way. And if what you fear in your head becomes larger, haven't you noticed the worse it gets? It's almost like you focus on the fear gets strength, it gets bigger and it looms larger. I remember a time in my life, and I've actually had many of these times, but I do remember specifically a time when I was living with a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And it was sort of out of my typical behavior because I tend to be sort of a positive person and I don't fear a lot of things, generally speaking. But during this time, I was having a really hard time. And so I asked work to give me some time off. And I thought that would alleviate my fear. But what ended up happening is that I just had way too much time on my hands and I wasn't taking any action. And my thoughts were taking me to these unpleasant places. And I felt so ill at ease. It was such a terrible feeling. The idle hands are the devil's workshop, as they say. I didn't have anything to work on. I didn't have a project to deal with. So it just amplified. But I decided, and it's kind of funny, but I decided with every single step, I would almost as if I were making a right-hand turn toward the positive. And when that negative thought would come in my head, I would say, nope, I'm going to replace it. I'm going to say something positive. And it was almost like step by step by step, I eventually got better and my fears started to ebb and that unnerving feeling started to go away. So fear is just one thought or one option. So we get to choose the thoughts that we have, which can make us feel more confident. And then if we take action, that's when the empowerment comes in. So have you ever noticed how time flies when you're having fun? And when you're so fully engaged in the moment, it doesn't leave any room for your mind to wander off and project into the future. It's then that you're so connected to the living in the here and now that the fear almost naturally dissolves. But then when you start thinking too much again, it can reappear. So fear is really like an illusion of the mind. So as Cindy said, she asked you to take out a piece of paper, and I like you to come up with an example in your life right now where you've lost all track of time because you were so engaged in that activity, it left little time for your mind to be afraid. Think about something right now where, like, for example, I'll give you one example for me. I don't know why, but well, I do know why. My mom gave me a puzzle for Christmas, and it was just a puzzle, and we completed the puzzle. But I kind of get on these little like bents where I get into things and I start to kind of want to do more and more and more of it. So we got another puzzle. And instead of the 500 piece puzzle, we got the 750 piece puzzle. And we did that puzzle. And just last weekend, I got another 1,000 piece puzzle because I wanted to amp up my game, right? And because it was raining here and in California, it doesn't often rain. So it was kind of like the perfect excuse to stay home. And so we worked on that puzzle for hours and hours. And I swear to God, I would look up at the time and it would be like 2 o'clock. Look up at the time, it was 4 o'clock. And it was fun because we got so immersed in the puzzle, we lost all track of time, and it didn't give me any chance for my mind to wander off into the future. And it's really, it's a fun thing, and it's enjoyable when you get so lost in the moment that you just really are so present that you don't give your mind that chance to wander and take you to places that are scary or uncomfortable. So you see, when you stay busy, fear dissipates. Dale Carnegie said, inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence. And he said, if you want to conquer fear, do not sit home and think about it. Go out and get busy. So there are a lot of fears in life. There's fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of being judged. One example may be the fear that comes with public speaking, say making a presentation for a business proposal. And when you feel fear, ask yourself right now, if you feel fear, what does your body feel like? And get in touch with that feeling of fear. You may catch yourself breathing shallow. You have like a nervous butterfly feeling in your stomach. You may be focusing on worrying about making a mistake or forgetting where you'll be in the presentation or saying too many ums. You may be thinking, no one will even be interested in hearing what I have to say. So you may start to self-sabotage. But if the opposite were true and you take in some nice deep breaths before entering the room and you stood with confidence, with your shoulders back, you know you've prepared and you're ready, and you give yourself some credit that what you'll have to say has merit, then you'll move from a limiting mindset to more of an empowering mindset. And you'll feel, most likely, I would think, much, much better. So we all deal with fear from time to time. It's just natural. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway. I mean, that is so true, right? Because at the end of the day, we can't escape having fears from time to time. Like I said, it's a natural human response and it can serve to protect us. I mean, fear can be good. If you're walking down the street and you don't feel comfortable, you feel danger. I heard Oprah say, go to the other side of the street, right? So fears are, like I said, a form of protection. But we don't want them to get carried away and take us to these crazy, unsafe places in our heads. So get out a piece of paper and write down a fear you have. I'm going to give you a minute to think of one because there's probably a lot of fears you've had in your life. But for this purpose, just write down one fear. And does anybody want to share a fear they have? Does anybody feel comfortable with that right now? And if not, that's fine. Okay. Is anybody there?
I have a fear of like getting sick or getting cancer.
Okay. So not just COVID, but
No, like sick.
okay. Yeah, well, it's a valid fear. And as we age, we realize that, we're not going to be here forever, right? And I work in healthcare, so I do see people get cancer and I see people get sick, but a lot of them, it's this crazy thing. I've met the most positive people working in the chemo clinic, and they really make you realize how, even when you're dealing with something that tragic, these people, they just rise to the occasion. And it can be, obviously, cancer can be a death sentence, if you will, but I've seen that these people, it's almost like they have a bigger appreciation for life. And it wouldn't say it's a blessing by any means, but I've seen the most resilient, like strong people deal with cancer. And as they say, God will only give you what you can handle. So, we all hope we don't have to deal with that, right? But that is a very, very valid, fear. Does anybody else have a fear they'd like to share?
I do.
Okay.
So this happened when I was in high school. I was driving down the expressway in the 4th lane and it was raining severely and I hydroplaned all the way to the right shoulder. My angels were looking out for me.
Yeah.
But ever since then, and I thought I'd worked on this and journal about this, prayed about this and everything. Still, how many decades later, when the pavement is wet, snowy, icy, rainy, very rainy, I'm like, I get nervous driving in that. And it's annoying. It really is annoying. And, we're supposed to have a big snow tomorrow and I'm already projecting to ask my husband to drive me to work.
Yeah. So do you think it's your thoughts are taking you to this place even still? I mean, here we are, it's 2021 and this happened, you said, how many years ago now?
Several decades.
Yeah, several decades. And you're still feeling that same feeling. So it's this emotional response that comes up inside you, right? And it makes you feel like it's going to happen again. I just know it. I mean, so if you catch yourself, what you're already doing is you're forming a dialogue. And would you say this dialogue is a present tense dialogue, or are you thinking about a future thing?
I try to, well, when it happens, when I drive in the ice and snow, and it's just like, I'm like, God, please be in the driver's seat. Please be in the driver's seat and stuff. And it's so present. And it's like my heart races, my hands get sweaty. And I'm like, I feel like I'm driving like an old lady. So no one drive behind me.
Yeah. So it's almost like that tiger's in the back seat and it's chasing you. That's that same physiological fear you're still having, even when you're in the car driving. Something that I do, and I don't know, maybe this helps me, maybe it doesn't, but whenever I get in the car, I say to myself, nothing's gonna happen to me. I will be fine. I get in the car with almost like a premonition in my mind, like I'm going to arrive at my destination. Nothing's going to happen to me. And I think that by having a positive thought, it sort of helps it helps you relax a little bit more. I think when we're in a fear state, we get so tense, that we're almost like we're predicting the worst case scenario. Maybe if you can try to say to yourself before you even turn the engine on, like, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to arrive safely. And I'm going to talk about this later in the presentation, but um, even if you were to, catch your wheels, do that little just shaky thing and everything, I would venture to say that you'll adapt because you've already been through it once before. And so you'll see that, like, I did this before and I can do this even if it were to happen again. So maybe try to think positively and realize that you'll adapt. I don't know if that helps.
Right. And every time I get in the car, I always say, God, you're in the driver's seat. We pray
Well,
for a
listen,
safe ride to and
I
from.
mean, I think to myself,
Yes.
all the things that happen in life, they're kind of, we have this silly thing that we think that we're always in control of everything. And I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we have to kind of give it up and say that we're going to go into this day with the best thoughts, the best intentions, and then it's going to turn out, the way that it's intended. But I think having a positive thought in your mind, like almost, what my friend does, she's so funny. I don't know if she's watching, but she would always go over the curb. I don't know, we'd have this funny saying and we'd say, mind the curb, because she'd have a tendency to go over the curb. And so she put a little plaque on the middle of her dashboard that says, mind the curb. So maybe do something like where, like, you can identify to yourself that, like, okay, I'm in that situation, I'm behind the wheel again, here we go, the weather's going to be bad today, but I'm going to put something there that makes me feel like I can do this, I'm going to be okay. But I appreciate you sharing the fear, and of course I'm winging my answer here, but I hope that helped a little bit. So anyway, back to just fears in general. I want you to get in touch with that feeling. So that feeling you have of fear, how is your breathing? Are you noticing that you feel tense? How is your expression on your face? Are you smiling? Are you gritting your teeth going about this particular fear? And what are you focusing on? Because when you're fearful, it presents something in your mind, right? It's almost like you're taking little snapshot pictures of in the future of what it's going to look like. And oftentimes fear makes us feel uncomfortable. It's not a happy picture. It's more of a scary picture, or a sad picture, or a worst case scenario. And then lastly, what kind of words are you using? What kinds of phrases are producing these emotions? I mean, are they positive phrases or are they most likely negative phrases? One example was, I'm going to get sick. So you're projecting these negative scenarios. Or you're driving, it's going to be scary because you're going to take yourself back to that scenario that happened all those decades earlier. It's not a happy picture. It's not a happy emotion. It's usually something scary and uncomfortable. But fears exist in our thoughts in the future because it's really a product of our imagination. And like I said earlier, when you're so lost in the moment, I would venture to say that each of these examples these ladies provided, when they're lost in the moment and they're doing something enjoyable, are they thinking these fears? Most likely not. They're not. They're not leaving room for that mind to unravel and take us to these places. So fear is fantasized experiences appearing real. It's when we let our minds take us to these places that feel like that tiger is still chasing us. And when we live in fear, we lose sight of what is real. Part of moving forward, despite having the fear, is when you allow yourself to fully feel and accept the emotional state of fear. Then it tends to lose some of its power. What we resist persists. So when we think of a fear, it's futurizing, meaning we're exaggerating the negative outcome in the future. Or we have an expectation that something should or could turn out a certain way. And when you have anxiety, your body goes on that high alert, activating the fight or flight response, which produces all these chemicals in our gut and our system, and it makes us feel uncomfortable, right? And if you ruminate and continuously think of things with a sad or bad outcome, these are all fear. So what do these all have in common? They're all when we're in a state of non-action, and it's when we're not living in the moment. And we've let our imaginations run wild into the future. And that's when that fear creeps in. So when you live in the moment, fear dissipates. Remember that fear is just one thought or one option. Here are 5 steps to face fear. Okay, you can accept it, identify it. What is the fear? And then feel it. How does it feel? And then face it. Get in the car. Get behind the wheel. Think of a positive outcome. And then practice it. So by practicing your fear, what you're doing is getting more comfortable with it. So you can't think it away, but by exposing yourself to your fear, you can become more comfortable, and you can form a pattern in your brain that you're going to be okay, even when you do that thing you're scared of trying, especially for the first time. So if you live in fear, it will persist. But if you live with fear, you can build self-confidence and act despite having it. Like I said, what you resist persists. So you'll begin to see the benefit of taking control of things in your life through your thoughts. Become more self-aware of your fears and the thoughts behind them. Allow the fear to dissipate by diminishing the emotional reactivity to your fears and your worries. Detach from the fear. So don't be attached to the outcome, because again, fear is in the future, right? It's not real. What would be real is the tiger's behind me right now and I have to run. But most of our fears are in the future. So don't be attached to the outcome. And then act intentionally despite having the fear. Fear is in the imagination. But how do we deal with an impending challenge that might rise up, and then we have to adapt? So what if we approach fear that same way, that in the future we will adjust accordingly and deal with it? So as Cindy mentioned, I have a book. It's called Awaken the Present. And I give this example, and this will be fun because fear is kind of a deep subject, but I'm going to give us a chance to lighten the mood a little here. You see, I went up to LA I went to stay overnight at an Airbnb, and I wanted to go see a concert in downtown LA. And unfortunately, downtown LA has a large homeless population, and I was going to go by myself. So I had a little bit of fear just because, of course, I have to be safe. I'm a woman and I'm alone in a, big city, whatever. But I went to this concert and nothing happened. And so I got one of those Uber drivers to drive me back to the Airbnb. And this guy had the nerve. He was coming on to me, asking me all these questions, wanted to know if I had a boyfriend. And I was just really uncomfortable. And he just was incessant. I mean, he wouldn't give up, So I made up this big story, like, oh, my boyfriend's at home waiting for me. And the guy bought it. And I was so relieved. He finally dropped me off. And I went to go to the gate, and I open up the gate, and there's a skunk sitting on the porch and these two cats on the other side, like cat and skunk in the middle. It was like they're having like a little midnight soiree, And I'm thinking to myself, how in the hell am I going to get to the front door? There's a skunk in the middle of the way. And I mean, I know that skunks spray you, and I just didn't want to be sprayed by a skunk. So here I was, it's midnight or past midnight at this point, and I'm standing out in front of a property in this strange area that I don't know, and I can't get in the door. And then finally this little skunk, he like meandered over to this side of the porch, and I was like, oh, good. And then he scampered back again. I couldn't believe it. And I really was at the mercy at this point of the skunk. And then he finally scampered away. I made this mad dash to the front door, and I turned the key, and I got in the door, and I shut it behind me. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe what just happened. And the reason I bring this up is that we just never know what's going to happen. I mean, we're all making it up pretty much as we go along anyway, but I had these fears ahead of time that I was going to be in downtown LA and I was going to meet with like a homeless person and get robbed or something crazy like that. But you see, what I ended up having to deal with was completely different. It's something that I couldn't have imagined. And this just shows how we as human beings adapt. So instead of ruminating about fears, try framing fears as having goals. To diminish fears, turn it into a goal and then give it a positive outcome. Pretend you have a fear of driving on the freeway. And that's funny. That was in my presentation before I got to hear your example. But I was saying a lot of people do have a fear of driving, especially on the freeway in LA, but it's a limiting thought. So having a fear of driving, it's a limiting thought. And it may having you contemplate potential negative outcomes. But by turning the fear into a goal, you can have an achievable result. So there's an acronym called SMART. It stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time limited. So let's say you really want to go see a Picasso art exhibit and it requires that you drive the freeway. So to avoid traffic, you could go on a Saturday. And since the exhibit would close at the end of the month, it's time limited. So instead of fear as something scary, think of fears as fun. They could be fun, exciting, an adventure. It builds your resilience and it builds your strength. So if you were to drive the freeway and go see the exhibit, then you'd be able to attain something pleasurable and worthwhile and something that's important to you. And once you've completed the goal, then you'll have formed a pattern in your brain that you're successful at carrying out goals and diminishing the power that the fear once had over you. I like to think of it as security versus adventure. So security and safety can be good things, but they can also keep us stuck. And it's a lot more fun to have adventures than to play it too safe. After all, in life, it's what we regret the things that we didn't do more than the things that we did, right? So our brain is like a muscle, and we must use it in order to become stronger and get more comfortable living with fear instead of pushing against it. Do you want to come up with another fear that you may have right now?
I will.
Okay.
So I have a fear of I just feel like I'm not a really well, I have this fear that when I speak um in a meeting that I am not making sense and that I am gonna lose track of the topic and then I'll, just sound like I'm just blah blah blahing.
Okay, well, as I mentioned in my presentation a little bit earlier, public speaking, I mean, that is like one of the biggest fears we have, right? And I think the fear of public speaking is because we're being critical of ourselves. Do you remember, I think it was the Brady Bunch, and Jan was giving a presentation or something in class, and Marsha or one of the characters said, just pretend like they're all, in their pajamas or naked or something like that. I don't know. But, I just think that everybody has this like big fear of talking. But when you're thinking about that presentation, would you say that you did the work to make the presentation interesting? And did you prepare? And are you not giving yourself enough credit? Because, think about it. Everybody, when you're putting yourself out there, I'm going to talk about this in the presentation too. When you're putting yourself out there, you're leaving yourself up for judgment. But my grandpa had a great saying, and it was, what makes you so important what makes you think you're so important that everybody's like worrying about you right now? Most everybody in life goes through life with this filter that it's all about me, right? And so everybody, I know about you, but in class, I remember I would be thinking that the teacher's gonna she's going to call on me to answer a question, and my face would turn so bright red because I'd be so worried about what I was going to say, and I wasn't even paying attention to what the teacher was talking about because I was thinking about myself, right? And so I think, just give yourself some credit, and if you've done the preparation, then believe in yourself instead of negating all your positive qualities. Try to build your confidence. And as they say, practice makes perfect. So, practice it a few times. Maybe have your grandkids or your husband or whoever listen to you. And then by doing it a few times, you're going to get so comfortable with talking about it that maybe you can even go off book a little bit, and it'll make it more fun and lucid, and you won't feel like you're holding on so tight, I hope that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else want to talk about a fear?
I can share.
Okay.
Mine's a two-parter. I have a fear of rejection, which will then lead to loneliness.
Okay. So you have a fear of loneliness and a fear of rejection because you think the rejection is going to lead you to loneliness. So you're kind of like in a loop, right? It's like you're going to put yourself out there, but then you're going to get rejected, and then you're going to be right back to where you were again. Yeah. Are you single?
Well, that's complicated.
Okay.
I'm on my way to being single.
Well, I have the same dang fear. I feel like I'm single. I've never been married. And sometimes I feel like I put myself out there. I take the step to say, okay, I'm going to be brave and I'm going to put myself out there. And then I ended up right back where I am again. So I kind of feel the same way, but I don't know. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? You'll never know what's out there unless you try. And then just by trying, you're not failing, you're just trying. I mean, I don't know. I think it's worth the risk to put yourself out there. And even if you do get rejected, at least you're not keeping yourself trapped in your own thoughts and your own limited mindset. I don't know. For me, rejection could come in lots of forms. I'll give you another example from my personal life is that this book that I just wrote, it took me forever and ever and ever to write it because I was so scared that it wouldn't be accepted, it would be rejected. And so I just kind of kept myself in this loop that I'll hold on to it until it's ready. And then I finally said, you know what? I think I'm ready to release it. And just by the fact of releasing it, it sort of helped me to just move beyond those limiting beliefs I had about my own self. And I think the more and more we put ourselves out there, the stronger we get. And even if you were to meet the love of your life, there's a chance you could lose them too, right? And so it's just, I think it's worth it to try, and it's worth it to put yourself out there. Otherwise, you'll just never know, life is not, it's just not designed to give us all the answers up front. We have to live through it. So I guess I could go to another part in my presentation now where I talk about, and this may come at a perfect time actually, is I talk about fear, but what is fear of failure? So we tend to avoid fear or avoid things because we think that means we won't be a success. Attaining success means, though, that our lives are going to change and they may transform for the better, even if we have success. Because fear of success could be the fear of getting noticed, which leaves you more vulnerable, or maybe the pressure or accountability that comes with success can seem intimidating. But attaining success demands failure. But avoiding failure limits us. So there's 3 action steps to take. Stop defining failure as the opposite of success. The opposite of success is not trying. And be brave enough to embrace failure and smart enough not to give it too much power. And get comfortable with discomfort, because on the road to success, failure will inevitably accompany it, but keep going anyway. So when I talk about safety, security, all these things that keep us stuck, it's a lot more fun to have adventures than to play it too safe. After all, in life, it's the things that we regret that we didn't do, right? So I think that a lot of times that people have fear and that they tend to futurize negative things is that they're just not comfortable with change. And people love routine. So I feel like it's just worth it to put ourselves out there. It's worth it to take a chance. So fears are they're often distorted thinking. It's when we imagine those negative places or unpleasant places, our fears are often cognitive distortions. I don't know if anybody's heard that term before, but cognitive means thinking and distortions mean untruths. So it's a habitual way of thinking, which is often negatively biased and it's inaccurate. So when we project into the future, we overgeneralize and we mind read or we jump to conclusions that something won't work out. And then that's when we're feeding that fear, the fear of illness, the fear of driving, the fear of rejection. So there's a powerful tool to deal with these thoughts, and it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's when you identify a troubling situation or condition or fear. And then you become aware of your thoughts and the emotions and beliefs about the problem. Identify negative or inaccurate thinking. And then the last step is to reshape the negative or inaccurate thoughts by making them more positive. And then take action. So when dealing with a fear, ask yourself, is this evidence-based or am I thinking irrationally? When we think of a fear using like all or nothing words, they try to defeat us. So untwist that thinking and reframe the anxiety producing situation and break it down into manageable bits. When we magnify the fears, we strengthen them, right? And so we make them bigger. And then when we break them down, then we make them into more manageable bits. So I want to give you an opportunity now to deal with a different fear. Think of something else that's come up in your life that's made you nervous or made you scared or made you fearful. And I want to give you about 3 minutes to work on a couple things. So on one side of the paper, we'll label it just for this purpose, the negative column. And on the other side of the paper, make it a positive. So on the negative side, I want you to write all the physiological feelings that you have when you think of this new fear and the worst case scenario. And then on the other side, describe the feeling you'll have by facing the fear and turning it into a goal and succeeding at it, or the best case scenario. So one side, worst case scenario, other side, best case scenario. And I'll give you about 3 minutes to work on it so you have opportunity to write it down and flesh it out for yourself. And I'll let you know when the time is up. I'll give you about another minute. Does anybody need any more time, or you think we're about ready to look at this? Okay, so again, one side, the physiological feelings that you have in your body when you think of the worst case scenario. And on the other side are the positive or best case scenario physiological feelings. I want to ask you if one column was longer than the other. Does anybody have an example where one column was much longer than the other? Or were they about the same?
My best case scenario list was longer, so I was glad to hear about that.
That's so exciting.
It is, because I was looking at the worst things, and all of a sudden I saw the flip side.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm being more objective today, which is good, and I hope that just lasts.
Yeah.
By
And
the
if you
way,
think, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
by the way, you're an excellent speaker.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yes.
you.
Breaking it down so easy for us to, this has been wonderful. So
Great.
yeah, I'm glad my list is longer though on the plus side.
Isn't that exciting?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's so cool because if you think about it, you can do this with anything that comes up that's a negative in your life and break it down and then just sort of look at the distortional thinking behind the negative stuff. I mean, we're like, I, I apologize. I forgot the speaker that said she was, or the listener that said she was scared to speak. But yeah, I mean, think about like if you broke down all those negative thoughts that you were thinking about your speaking, and then you thought about these positive things. I mean, I'd venture to bet that your body felt differently, right? And you started to see that you can tackle these things. And when we aware of our thoughts and beliefs about our fears and identify the negative thinking about it, we begin to break down those distortions. And that cognitive behavioral therapy is actually very effective. I've done it. I've unfortunately had the luck, or if you call it that, to have had to be admitted to the hospital because, as Cindy said, I'm bipolar. And a lot of times what they do when you get out of the hospital is they want to put you into like an intensive outpatient therapy program. And they have us do these cognitive distortional breakdowns. And it is helpful because a lot of times our brains take us to these very extreme places where we think everything is all one way or all one way. Like, I'm going to be rejected, so it's going to lead to loss. And we start thinking about these just extreme situations. And life is really something a little bit more in the middle. So I think it's important to break down when we have these negative thoughts, just sort of break it down, untwist that thinking, start to think about the possibility that something positive can actually happen, right? Kind of like I said when I was so anxious that one time, and I just had a fear of everything. I just told myself with every freaking step I'm going to make, I'm going to think something positive. Something negative comes up, I'm going to change it to a positive. It was fun. I mean, it was kind of like silly and a little obsessive, but I decided like that was the one way I was going to break free of all this negative thinking. So I think that it's important to realize that we're given new chances every single day to work on this, right? It's a project we really will have for the rest of our lives because fears are going to come up, negative thoughts are going to come up, and things will come up that we'll adapt to. And this is just life, you know? I mean, it's sort of a game. There's this really good book I wrote one time called The Game of Life. It's very little, but it's packed with a ton of really good information. And so the only way, like, out of fear is to go through it. And I'm going to leave with this. So there was this really wonderful book that I'm sure everybody's read, and it's called The Little Engine That Could. You think of that little engine, and they say, I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. And in the end, I thought I could. So I'm going to leave you with that. But if anybody has any other comments or questions, I am here to listen.
Thank you, Laura. This was great. A couple of things that I wrote. Actually, I wrote down a lot. I wrote down a lot of stuff. One is the snapshot of pictures, you know, and that's a great way to identify it. It's like we just see these, you know, the glimpses of our future, and we're just imagining, like you said, the worst case scenario, and then it just grows and grows and grows, and it gets bigger, and our feelings start to, you know, we get tense, we breathe very shallow. But it's the snapshot of feelings that we're seeing, right? The worst case scenario. And one of the things that you had us do, which was super powerful, is the cognitive stuff. And I would love to have everybody take another opportunity, just 3 minutes, where you write down your fear, because as soon as you write it down, it loses power. You look at it. When it's in your head, it's so big, and it just grows and it swims. So write down, here's the quick exercise going along with what you were saying, is write down. I'll explain the exercise and then we'll do it. Is write down your fear, like just write it down black and white, and then going with your best case and worst case. But the cognitive is write down all the fears around it. So let's just say you have a fear of success, right? I mean, that's a very, very common fear. And I love the definition of the opposite of success is not failure. It's that you didn't try, right? So write down your fear, write it down, then write down all the stuff that you're fearful. Like Jen, I'll use your example of, you know, I'm going to be lonely, I'm going to be rejected, you know, write that down. And then on the other side, write down either the solution or negate it. So if you have a fear of success, okay, I'm not going to succeed. Okay, so what's the solution, or what's the negating it? I'm not going to succeed. Okay, what's the opposite? I'm going to learn something, right? I'm going to get something out of it. So write down what you fear, and then on the other side, either negate that fear or write down the solution. And then there's a third part to it, but we'll come back. Is that okay if everybody does that? Take about 3 minutes. I know this feels like we just did this exercise, so the reason I'm reiterating it is because there's a really cool action item that you can do along with it. So. So if you're looking at, and Laura, you definitely described this the best is the cognitive, but take a look at where you wrote, the solution and you negated it, and then take your pen and circle 3 action items that you can do. So anybody want to share? So look at the solutions and then go, okay, what are 3 action items that I can do to conquer this fear, that you can do. So when Laura was talking about making it a goal, this is exactly that. Anybody want to share any ahas with that? Mine was that, you're always learning, right? There's, you're always learning something. What else did I write? What else? Who else wants to share?
I'll share. So my fear, of course, is my kids driving, getting their driver's license and getting to an accident. So some action items that, when I write them down, it makes that fear much less, but it was just, I need to have them drive more. I mean, I never do because it's just easier for me to say, I'll just drive. So to have them while I have just this limited time driving with me. So practice with them more and then, practice what I preach. So when I'm driving with them, when I'm behind the wheel, don't be on my phone, don't be texting. So just those actions will limit my fear of them getting into an accident when they drive. So that's all
Practice it. See, that's what's so important is practice it. That's how we get over our fears, is we get good at them.
Oh, and then anybody else want to share? Ellen, that was like a perfect example. That was a perfect example.
There's a lot of fear about driving, isn't there? I'm noticing there's a lot of fears with driving.
I can share my my second fear example was financial in nature, just being coming through on the other side of things, just not having anything. So an action item was to find ways to simplify and to actually just make a budget based on a worst case scenario so that I can see that I could probably still do things even if I ended up in my worst case scenario.
And you have so much proof on your end, Jennifer, that you can make money. You know what I mean? Like, so go back to evidence. And Laura, you said this perfectly too, is go back to evidence-based. Like there's evidence-based that there's no reason to have the financial. Laura, somebody was asking what this SMART stands for. You can.
Oh, it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time limited. So for a goal, or like we were saying, turn your fear into more of a goal to overcome. So make it specific and make it measurable and something that is attainable. So an action item that you feel like you can work on this, make it attainable and realistic, and then make sure to give it a time limit, because if we allow ourselves to say that one day we're going to do this, then one day becomes the next day and the next day, the next day, right? So make sure that it's something that you give yourself a time frame. Just by the word frame, we're putting something into context that we're going to make it something that we're going to work on and we're going to accomplish. And then you can move on to the next thing and the next thing. And that's when you build your confidence. So like practice at your fear, right?
Good. Get
It
good with
sounds
your
funny,
fears.
but it's true. It's like the more you practice, like I know I gave an example in the ebook that I put up there for everybody is that you remember what it felt like to go to school on that first day and you didn't know who your teacher was going to be. You didn't know whose desk you were going to sit next to. And so you had all these unknowns, right? And then by like that couple days into school, like you didn't have that fear anymore because it was something that, you know, you knew what to expect sort of. So it stopped, the brain stopped unraveling to these scary places. You just made it something so that you get comfortable at it. You practice at it. Does anybody else have any questions for anything that I spoke about that you'd like to discuss or get more clarity on?
You know, I just wanted to say, and this is a tricky one, but you know, I experience physical pain, and it is hard to not fear that because the pain can be almost quite unbearable, like hospitalization type of pain. But it's a type of pain that I've dealt with now for a year, and I've tried, you know, the cognitive stuff and, you know, to face it, to accept it, to, you know, I do meditations with it, but man, that's a tough one. And I don't know. I just don't even know how to handle that kind of fear, you know?
So what has you, are you fearful that it's just going to happen again? And so you're worried like it's coming again and I just know it's coming and then I'm going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. And that's
It's like
never going to go away.
Anticipation, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, you know, I don't even know if you could call that a fear. It's more like my illness, knowing that it's just a condition that I have to deal with and accept it. So the subtitle for my book that I wrote called Awake in the Present is my journey to living with peace with mental illness. In other words, it's there and it's not going to go away. And I can't think it away. I can't make it go away. It's a chemical thing. And it, when I'm super stressed out, and I'm sure you feel the same way with your pain, is that stress can make it worse, right? Mm-hmm. And so it is there. And it's not a figment of my imagination. It is something that I have to deal with. But I've kind of gotten to a point where I can still have peace knowing I have it and still, despite that, still live a good life. Because it is what it is. I mean, we're all dealt with certain cards, right, of what we have to deal with. And some things are just not part of our imagination. They're real. It's evidence-based. I mean, you deal with this and it is something that you have to live with, but try to frame it that, and despite having it, I'm still going to live a good life. I'm still going to find ways to get around it and move through it instead of like resisting it. Because I think when you think, oh, I'm going to have that feeling again, and you're resisting at it, then it's like it's becoming bigger. More like accept it and go through it.
Yeah, I'm trying.
I know. Life is not easy. That's why we're all here. We're all working on stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, before we wrap up, does anybody else want to share something? Any ahas, any fears that you're working through? Was this helpful?
Yes.
And Laura,
I just had one quick question, if that's
Yeah.
okay. I like the saying, not trying is the opposite of failure, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Because I'm having that fear right now that I've never really had a career or something that I was really passionate about or felt comfortable with. And I want to go back to school for occupational therapy. And then I just have this real fear that I'm going to fail at that, but also the fear of not giving that a try, that in the future I'll regret not trying. So it's kind of like that circle in my mind, and that that phrase really hit me when you said that.
Well, if I can go back to my example of taking a step, positive step, positive step, positive step. They say a journey start something about 1,000. What is that phrase about a journey start of 1,000 steps starts with like
1,000 miles starts with one step or something?
Something like that. Yeah. So, you know, the first step is just to enroll in the class and then take 1 or 2 classes, right? So instead of thinking, projecting way off in the future what it's going to be like once you've got this degree, or what you're going to do with it, or how you're going, if you're going to be successful at it, just take a class, take 2 classes, take 3 classes, and then see how you feel after that. And I bet you, if you really are passionate about it and you enjoy it, again, back to my whole thing about when you're so living in the moment and you're enjoying something, then you don't have that fear anymore, because you're living in the present moment and you're actually doing something that you enjoy. And so give yourself a chance to try. And even if you take a class or 2 and decide, I don't like this after all, then think of all the information that you have just by knowing that you tried and you've taken a step. I think it's wonderful. Occupational therapy, boy, oh boy, that's a great career to go into. And the fact that you even have that thought in your mind that you want to do it is showing you that that may be the direction that your life is being pointed in. So believe in that and just take a step.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I have a comment / question. So a lot of these concepts I'm pretty familiar with. I've had the fortunate experience to be in a PHP program myself, and it was all CBT based and DBT based and that sort of thing. And so I get all of that, but it's so much energy and it's tiring to go against your nature, right? When you're wired to have some challenges that make you distort your thinking or that. And so do you have any like suggestions on how to ward off that fatiguing, like, because there's sometimes when I can be like really on it and be like, okay, I know this, I know I'm having a distortion, and I can go through and okay, I'm going to follow these things to get my head reframed. And then there's other times that I'm just like, I don't want to do this work, it's too hard for me.
Honor that. Say, today's not my day, right? I mean, let's face it. If we were to work on ourselves 365 days a year, we'd be the freaking Dalai Lama, right? But no, we're human. We have life, and it's going to come up. And sometimes you just don't have the energy. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I love to watch. I don't know if anybody's watched it, Schitt's Creek. It's on Netflix. It's so funny, and I love it so much. And like, I just like to veg out in front of the TV sometimes. And I don't want to work on myself, but the days that I do have the energy and I do have the drive and I do have the mindset that I'm going to work on something, then that's the day to do it. Right. And so I think take yourself off the pressure cooker of that I always have to be working on this and I always have to be strategizing and remembering all these concepts and tools. Now, today, maybe we're working on it. Tomorrow, you watch Schitt's Creek. I don't know. I don't think that we're designed to constantly work on ourselves. And if we were, then we'd sort of be like, I don't know, a little bit of a egomaniac, because we'd always be thinking about ourselves, right? No, we have our lives and our families and our children and our mates and our boyfriends and girlfriends and other people to think about too. So, but when you do have the energy and you do want to work on yourself, then you can open up this notebook and say, okay, I'm going to work on this today. Yeah.
I love that. Just honor it. That. What a relief, right? We don't always.
Yeah, please.
Relief.
Yeah. I mean, Cindy and I have been on this journey. We met, like she said, like over 20 years ago. And we've been on this like spiritual journey all these years. And boy, oh boy, there's been times where I delved deep inside myself to, discover all my parts and uncover my feelings and fears and emotions. And then there's other times I just want to watch Real Housewives and veg out and escape. So I think a full life is when you leave the ability to have a little bit of both,
All right. So yeah, we'll wrap up. I put your book link in the chat.
Thank you.
Present. And then there's the ebook, which is different than your Awaken the Present. And so that is on Facebook. So you can email or go to Facebook or email me, and I don't have.
And then it's the ebook is 50% off. There's a code right there, I think. But the Awaken the Present is much more of a deep dig inside all kinds of concepts and theories and solutions, and I talk about my life. It's an open book, as they say.
Yeah. All right. This was so good. I loved how you explained everything. Does anybody have anything before we sign off? This was, and check or email us for the link for the recording too. And I'll probably go ahead and put it on YouTube as well. But any other thoughts? And use this. I mean, when definitely use these exercises, because it just, reiterating, when it's in our head and we start projecting our fears, they're so big. But as soon as you put it on paper, it loses so much power. And then when you actually say, okay, here's what I'm fearful of, and then here are the solutions, now you put yourself back into control.
Yep, exactly. And thank you, everybody, for allowing me to, share this time with you. It's been fun for me, and it's great to be able to work with Cindy. And I look forward to more of her retreats. So.
All right, cool. So jump. If you guys have anything, just jump. Just share anything you want to share.
Well, if nobody is going to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Laura, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I'm very familiar with a lot of things that you talked about today, and it's very exciting to, kind of touch base with that stuff again. And I'm going to use some of the things that you gave us. That was really very awesome, information. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to read a poem because we always end with a poem. So, and I'm going to repeat the poem that we read last time. So some of you that were here, it's going to be the same thing, but it pertains to the subject, and it's perfect. Okay. It's Our Deepest Fear. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be? Brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous. Actually, who are you not to be. You are a child of God. You playing small has not served the world. All right. Sorry, you guys. I forgot to put on my glasses. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in every one of us. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
I love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.